We scale far further than what any L1 can scale, in our opinion. We just did a stress test on Mainnet, so everyone was able to do it, where we did 55,000 transactions per second. That was a mixture of UniV free transfers as well as ERC transfers. And while that was happening, we were allowing users to play low latency games like Crossy Fluffle with zero UX trade-offs. Now, this is only possible because we've chosen to build a layer 2.
Bankless Nation, I'm here with Namik and Lei Yang of MegaETH. Namik, Lei, welcome to Bankless.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be back.
All right, so some pretty interesting times to be a layer 2 on Ethereum. We're recording the day after Vitalik released his layer 2 tweet. A big moment, to say the least. When you guys just saw this tweet rocket around Twitter, it got so big that basically everyone on crypto Twitter was commenting on this. What was your reaction to it? Namik, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question, David. I think it was honestly a validation of our point of view for a while. We're called MegaETH. We love Ethereum. I mean, I got into crypto because of ETH, so it has a special place in my heart. But the reason why Mega uses Ethereum is not because of fanboyism, but because it allowed us to build the most performant possible blockchain, right? So Ethereum gives a guarantee of sorts, right? The guarantee is simple. It's the most decentralized Turing-complete blockchain. And we take that guarantee and we say it's sufficient for us to build a hyper-performant execution environment that we believe can solve for an entire new set of use cases. And that's basically the relationship between MegaETH and Ethereum. Vitalik kind of points towards that in his, what would I do if I was an L2 today? He says he would build a bunch of stuff which is not similar to Ethereum L1. He mentioned 6 things. We do 50% of them off the bat. We scale, buzzword, but it is a word. We scale far further than what any L1 can scale, in our opinion, right? So we just did a stress test on Mainnet, so everyone was able to do it, where we did 55,000 transactions per second. That was a mixture of UniV free transfers as well as ERC transfers. And while that was happening, we were allowing users to play low latency games like Crossy Fluffle with zero UX trade-offs. Now, this is only possible because we've chosen to build a layer 2. So that's one of the things we do, which Vitalik had described. We've also built an ultra low latency environment, something that really can't be done with a traditional consensus-based layer 1 system. And we've decided to do a bunch of unique, wacky things on the chain, which we did because the applications wanted us to. That's an example is our native enshrined oracle of Chainlink. So when I saw the article /tweet, I was happy because a strong ETH is good for crypto. I think if ETH doesn't do well, our entire industry, i.e. smart contract blockchains, we're all screwed. And I was kind of happy because it almost meant we can drop some of the traditional alignment games. You have to use ETHDA, and we can try build the most performant systems we can and hopefully capture new sections of the market. Lei, what do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty much about differentiation because to us, it's pretty uninteresting to try to build and replicate exact primitives provided by the layer 1 because then first, of course, you face the question, why do I use a layer 2 that provides essentially the same service as the layer 1? But also, it's just technically uninteresting in uninteresting in a technical sense, in an academic sense that you are basically trying to replicate things in a much harder way. In the sense that actually, I think to the contrary of common belief, it's actually very hard to build a secure layer 2. And if all you want from a layer 2 is kind of just adopt Ethereum security as is, then I think you are better off building an alt layer 1. I would say I would go as far as that.
Yeah, I do think in Vitalik's tweet, there's definitely some validation of maybe I'll call it the barbell approach to Ethereum and to layer 2s, which is on one side of the barbell with one heavyweight, you have Ethereum, and that's going to be slow from transactions per second, but it's going to be max decentralized, and that's good for lots of use cases, including anchoring a layer 2, but also slow DeFi, and that's getting faster, by the way. So that's one side of the barbell. The other side of the barbell, you have some extreme things that do things that aren't replicating what the Ethereum L1 does, but that kind of explore a frontier in an a totally different domain. And so MegaETH seems well positioned on the barbell strategy in that it's just like accelerating a number of things. One in particular is just like insane scaling levels that the ETH layer 1 cannot do. But I want to maybe broaden this because there's so much to discuss with this Vitalik tweet, I feel like. Like, one is just that, like, this feels like a departure from maybe how Ethereum, how Vitalik, how the community, how even at one time Bankless thought about the role of layer 2s. It was not too long ago, maybe 3 years ago, there were people like POLYMARKET talking about how layer 2 scale. There was people like Justin Drake saying, hey, like if you're on the L1, gas fees are high, get off the L1 and go to the L2, right? And that was oft quoted. Even on Bankless, we would talk about like the scaling strategy for Ethereum was primarily L2s. And the idea was like you take everything that worked on the L1 and it's expensive, and then you move it to an L2 and it should just work. In fact, Vitalik kind of acknowledges this. He says, the original vision is no longer working. Ethereum itself needs to scale. In the original version, basically, we were offloading a lot of this to L2s, and that's kind of no longer necessary because the L1 is scaling. I think of this as a pivot, not a values pivot, but I'm going to use the P word, a pivot in terms of the roadmap itself, in terms of what was originally envisioned with the Rollup-centric roadmap and where we are now. To me, it's a very logical pivot. We were talking about this on Bankless probably 18 months ago when we're just kind of feeling out whether this made sense or not. But there was a lot of immune system attack on the idea of this tweet. And you can even see it. I think some in the Ethereum community are like, oh, we feel disillusioned by this. This feels like, a departure from what Ethereum has been saying for many years. This feels like wasted time and wasted energy. That's a lot of different thoughts, but that's because there's so much to unpack. I feel like with this post, it's like, 3 to 5 years of Ethereum history. Do you guys have any thoughts on what I just said? Do you view this as a pivot? Is it logical to you, or is it more of the same of where Ethereum was always going? What do you think, Namik?
I think for me, it's a sad realization of like Moloch 1, almost in some ways, right? We have to be honest, everyone has different incentives, right? Like I remember one of these points was there's been stage 1 rollups that told me they did not want to become stage 2, point blank. And the reason is because it was the regulatory environment, they prefer to be more centralized. And it's a bit of a shame, I would say, right? But I also acknowledge that we are to blame as well, right? There was another article that came out a few days before these tweet, which was like MegaETH in the depth of the stage 1 rollup, where the entire argument in that article was, hey, like so far everybody who basically disregarded the traditional value sets of like following Ethereum L2 convention, they were not very serious people. Right? They were not trying to build really, really good product. While what our team did is like we kind of forsaked some of those value propositions, trying to build good UX. And so I think we're to blame as well. On my end, I think it's good that the L1 is scaling. I think it is a bit of an overreaction to say that Ethereum will no longer need L2s. The reason why Ethereum is cheap now is because all activity moved to L2s. But like, we will very quickly get back to a world where like there's $200 transactions on ETH1. So we need to scale the layer 1. I don't think it's as easy as like, boom, it's done. But I think Ethereum and the EF needs to take Ethereum's success into their own hands and understand that L2s are trying to build businesses or trying to build products that are valuable. And I think ultimately, that's where we see PMF of like institutions as layer 2s, right? They like that trade-off.
Lei, I'm interested in your takes on this too.
Right. So I think first it's a logical. It is a pivot. So yeah, it's a logical pivot, and we kind of saw it coming from the get-go of MegaETH. So we're not surprised at all. And to like the narrative of about Ethereum wasting the last 4 or 5 years, quote unquote, chase the layer 2 roadmap, I don't think that's valid, because first one has to consider I think the origin of the layer 2 roadmap. I think it's really just because I think back in 2018, the hot topic about scaling is sharding, right? Remember that? And then a natural evolution of sharding is layer 2s, because you can basically regard each shard as a layer 2 today. And I think the original idea is that Ethereum would run and operate all the shards. And I think then the question comes, hey, why does it has to be Ethereum? Why don't just delegate it to a few teams so that we get some diversity, some competition, some experimentation? I think experimentation is one of the most interesting thing that came out of the layer 2 roadmap, because with the roadmap, I think Ethereum started to focus on really building the substrate that can support experimentation. I don't think many people in the community kind of realized how general purpose the Ethereum infrastructure has become in terms of supporting consensus-less blockchains, which are layer 2s. The DA, the dank sharding, the portal dank sharding, and all the upgrades and the blobs, I think they all are like critical in terms of supporting the layer 2 infrastructure. So now that the infrastructure is done, I think it's actually fine that the layer 2 is kind of back at scaling itself, which I think is totally logical, because you also need a good coordination layer to synchronize all the layer 2s to serve as the hub. But I really don't think like the pivot. I really don't think like the energy we spend on this substrate is wasted or something, because I think MegaETH is only possible because Ethereum was chasing this layer 2 centric roadmap for a few years. I'm extremely grateful that it did so that we can have this interesting experiment we're working with, and as well as many other experiments I think that are going to come. So yeah, I don't think it's a sunken cost in any sense. It's actually pretty good.
Have you checked out SHOWDOWN yet? SHOWDOWN is poker rebuilt from the ground up by some of the world's top players in Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, and poker. With SHOWDOWN's action cards, an additional layer of gameplay is added onto the game of poker. Action cards give dueling players more agency, strategy, and tricks for winning the pot. Built on MegaETH's real-time blockchain, SHOWDOWN has completely abstracted away everything crypto. Privy hides the wallet, there's seamless payment and deposit flows, and MegaETH makes everything happen in real time and zero fees, making SHOWDOWN ready to onboard your friends without any friction. It's also free to play and built without any pay-to-win mechanics. Players compete in the free market and with real money on the line. SHOWDOWN is played with MegaETH's USDM in the background, so when players deposit money into SHOWDOWN, it's converted into USDM, connecting SHOWDOWN to the USDM flywheel that all MegaETH apps contribute to. You can play SHOWDOWN for free, so you can practice and get good before you get comfortable with real USDM on the line. Experience poker like never before with SHOWDOWN. Check it out at alpha.showdown.game.
Few people in crypto put real skin in the game when they make public top or bottom calls. The DeFi report is one of them. The week before the October 10th flash crash, Michael from the DeFi report emailed his entire newsletter saying he's going aggressively risk off and sold the majority of his book from crypto into cash. This is when ETH was about $4,000 and Bitcoin was 110. Michael runs the DeFi report, an industry-leading research platform built on data, cycle awareness, risk management, transparency, and most importantly, skin in the game. We like Michael at Bankless. We like his analysis, and that's why you hear him on the Bankless podcast about once a month. And the DeFi report is giving Bankless listeners 1 free month of access to the DeFi report. So if you're looking for some sharp, data-driven analysis to make better informed decisions around your portfolio, you can learn why and how Michael called the top and what he's doing next, all in the DeFi Report Pro. Check it out. There is a link in the show notes.
Lei, I think I agree with that. I mean, layer 2s have been massively beneficial to Ethereum, and the layer 2's alignment with Ethereum, like both economic security-wide, has been beneficial to them as well. So it feels like a win. It's just very interesting. I feel like sometimes, maybe this is true of all different communities in all areas, where social groups have a tendency to kind of oscillate, like a pendulum swing, in like too far in one direction, then too far in the other. And so what was happening was there was this thought within Ethereum that L2s are Ethereum, exactly the same thing, and that they will solve all of Ethereum's scaling problems. And that was a naive perspective from the early days of the Rollup-centric roadmap. And we were too far on that extreme. Now, what I almost see, some reaction to Vitalik's tweet, is an oscillation too far in the other direction as the pendulum swings, which is like people now saying, oh, the L2 roadmap has failed. It's over for Ethereum. This is like, 5 years of wasted time and energy, and the project's done, and all of these things, without understanding the value that L2s are bringing to the table and have brought Ethereum, and all of the various ways that those have contributed to even scaling the L1, and projects like, quite frankly, Lighter and MegaETH on the horizon, really differentiating what they can do. I guess one question I have for you, though, to distill this for the listener, because on that other side of the pendulum swings, people have said things like, well, why be an L2 at all? Like, there's no such thing as like L2s, okay? Like, everything is just a chain. And I don't think that's true either. But in order to get into that, I think we need to understand the security guarantees and the property rights guarantees that users actually get when they're on MegaETH. And just help frame this out. So I'm a user, let's say, I have assets from Ethereum, I move them to MegaETH, so they're sort of rooted in the security of Ethereum, okay? What do I have? What property rights do I have? Do I have, because you guys are using Eigen for DA, of course, right? So it's a different type of rollup from that perspective. And then I'm not sure what your stages are going to look like once this is all operational, what the trajectory there is. But like, say in a year from now, if I'm a user on MegaETH, what do I get in terms of inheriting Ethereum's property rights? Do I get censorship resistance fully, the way I would on Ethereum? Do I get the ability to exit my assets? I feel like that's just hard for people to understand right now in this chaos and swirl. So help us with that.
Yeah, of course. So if we're talking about a year from now, actually, you'd get pretty much almost all the important features you would want on Ethereum, with the caveat that you have to trust both Ethereum, trust as in trusting that Ethereum will not reorg beyond some certain depth, especially beyond the finality, and also, or censor your transactions. And plus, you have to trust EigenDA in the sense that whatever we, as MegaETH, submit to EigenDA, they make it available for anyone to read, and they kind of stand by the claim, right? So again, so we're listing the trust assumptions. The difference between layer 1 and layer 2, especially our sort, is that you not only have to trust Ethereum, but also EigenDA, which I think is a pretty valid trade-off because of the immense throughput scaling you have from EigenDA. And in terms of then, with those trust assumptions, the guarantees you have, first, the layer 2 cannot censor you, in the sense that if your transactions are being maliciously excluded from the layer 2, if you just go to the layer 2 to try to submit a transaction, you can always go back to the layer 1 and submit your transaction there. And the layer 2 sequencer will be forced to include your transaction. So this is like the classical censorship resistance. So it's actually pretty funny because we're having this frontier stage of our mainnet, and we're doing a whitelisting on the RPC so that we only allow builders onto the chain, so that regular users they don't make mistakes and lose money, right? I think that's a responsible thing to do. But we always know that there's this censorship resistance bridge. It's live today, right now. There's censorship resistance. You can now submit a transaction to the layer 1 inbox of our chain, and it'll be forced to be included on to the layer 2. It's been live for the whole time of the frontier stage, even if we're doing the RPC whitelisting. So I've always been a bit worried that users might just submit transactions onto the layer 2 through this mechanism. So censorship resistance. Second, the assurance that you can always exit the layer 2 whenever you want. And this, in part, is achieved by censorship resistance, because to exit, you have to submit a transaction on layer 2. And if the sequencer does not allow you to do so, you go through the mechanism I just described. And then the layer 2 will be forced to allow you to exit by proposing a state proposal, certifying that your exit or your withdrawal is valid. And this is achieved by allowing anyone observing the layer 2 to provide such certification. So even if MegaETH decides to disappear tomorrow, anyone else can just come and submit those certifications. And you can use this certification to claim your money from the layer 1 end of the layer 1, layer 2 bridge to MegaETH, right? You can just take your money. And a few other, and also a few other guarantees. For example, your transactions will not be miscalculated. It will not be erroneously executed because there is the fraud-proof system, and with that, we're actually using a ZK-based optimistic fraud-proof system in the sense that if the sequencer ever makes a mistake, anyone can just permissionlessly submit a proof, a ZK proof, showing to a layer 1 contract that the sequencer is doing something wrong. And at that stage, the sequencer is going to be slashed, and you can stay assured that no one can claim your money that does not belong to them, right? So these are the assurances. So censorship resistance, guaranteed correctness of execution, and guaranteed ability for you to just escape whenever you want.
So that's a great set of property rights, basically. And the trade-off is if I'm willing to trust Ethereum, which I already am, and then Eigenlayer, and of course Eigenlayer that's economically secure, then I get all of the benefit of scalability on something like MegaETH. I got to ask the question, where does stage 2 fit in all of this? So part of Vitalik's comment was like, okay, L1s, they're only going to, a lot of them are only going to stay with, stage 1. And my understanding of stage 1 is basically like upgrading contracts and such. It requires a security council. What is that? It's a group of parties that can collude and they can update these contracts and update the rollup at any point in time. And so if they all did that, then they could actually yoink your funds, and that's why it's different. How about in your setup? You didn't mention stage 2 once. I mean, is stage 2 relevant for MegaETH, and if so, how?
Very interesting question. And thanks for the reminder. Yes, you also have to trust that the Security Council is not going to misuse your power because within a year, after a year, we do see ourselves in stage 1, but actually it's probably not good for us to claim ourselves to label a MegaETH as a stage 1/stage 2/stage 0 chain, because I think the stages only pertain to rollups, and rollups by definition they have to use Ethereum DA, and we use Eigen DA. Sorry for being pedantic. But yes, yes, you do have to trust the Security Council, which we're picking very seriously. And so where does stage 2 come into play? I think stage 2 basically says, get rid of the Security Council. Code is to govern you, for life, immutability, right? There is going to be at least one part of the chain governance logic that is immutably enshrined on the layer 1. Here, I mean, deploy a contract without a proxy, right? Just deploy the contract, and the contract as is will govern, say, how and when you can upgrade your logic. And maybe you cannot, govern that you cannot, govern the fact that you cannot upgrade your logic at all. So because that it's a huge commitment, because you are basically saying one piece of the design of the rollup of the layer 2 is going to be fixed forever, for the lifetime of the universe, for the lifetime of Ethereum, which are equal. And so this is a huge commitment, and it's a big risk, because what if you find out a bug 1,000 years from now, right? You have to correct them. But if you are a stage 2 rollup then, or layer 2, then I think it's pretty hard for you to do this correction. I think that's why I think also in Vitalik's post, I think there was kind of a realization that actually reaching stage 2 is a little bit harder than what people expected a few years ago, because you are really making a big bet that there's a piece of code in your rollup logic that you are never going to touch at all. So I think this is why it's pretty hard to reach stage 2. I don't think it's responsible to claim that we will reach stage 2 within a year, or maybe even within 2 years. But I think first, it's a really interesting goal to chase after. I'm personally very interested in a form of verification of software, and I think it's a big cornerstone in us reaching stage 2, which means perfectly correct code. And I think with AI, it's quite interesting, because I think the thing that AI does the best is the stuff that is hard to produced but easy to verify, right? For example, proofs of software code. Like it's pretty hard for you to prove that a piece of software code is correct. But if you kind of draft up a proof, it's actually very easy for you to verify. So I think with AI, with formal verification, we are on track, but still there's a long way to go.
That's the crux of this to me too, is just like, it's unclear whether I as a user actually want stage 2 on any of my rollups, to be honest. Like, because what's worse to me? Trusting that the teams in place won't screw me over and the Security Council won't screw me over, or trusting that there won't be any bugs in the contract. Like, what would be a really bad UX is if there was some bug that froze all of my assets in a chain. And am I celebrating stage 2 at that point? Hell no. I hate this. Like, I hate what happened, right? So I guess that's part of maybe the realization as part of this kind of pivot. And this is, by the way, it's not coming out of nowhere. I mean, this is just saying the quiet part out loud. Everyone has sort of already known what Vitalik was talking about here. But it's basically saying, hey, stage 2 is just it's on this horizon. Most rollups may never get there. It's unclear whether we actually want that to happen. If it does happen, it's on the 5 to 10 year type horizon when everything is formally verified. And so if you're just going to be a rollup and stay stage 1, you may as well add all of these exceptional features to your layer 1 that make it truly differentiated from Ethereum. I think that's kind of the logic that's happening here. It's basically the recognition that no rollup is going to get to stage 2 on any time scale. And so you may as well stay stage 1 and then make it up for incredible features that you're offering to the community. That's how I'm thinking about this.
Totally, yeah. And I think when people really claim, when people literally mean by rollups being Ethereum equivalent, it has to be stage 2 because in Ethereum, you don't have to trust a security council, right? And I think that's why I think people start to realize that actually, if we treat the rollup scaling, the rollup centric scaling roadmap as building a bunch of shards that are literally Ethereum equivalent, it's actually very hard task. And I think 5 years ago, people underestimated the difficulty of this, and I think people also kind of overestimated the difficulty of ZK proving. So or efficient ZK proving. So it's a max. I think we made good bets and bad bets.
I think there are a few teams that are working on making stage 2 rollups, and I think that's also exciting. So I don't want to unvalidate or all the hard work that they're doing. I think on our end, it's just this very at least from my perspective, a very left curve brain is we should work on Ethereum L1 needs to scale, but it also can't scale in a way where it compromises its value proposition to the market. And forget MegaETH, forget L2s, right? I think the reason why if ETH wins is obviously A is platform economics. It's here, it has a lot of liquidity, it has a lot of users. But I also think there's value in being the most decentralized Turing complete blockchain. And for a long time, we were saying, okay, well, let's just ossify the whole thing now and not touch anything because this is efficient. And we'll just do it all in L2s. And that was not the right answer, right? But the right answer was okay, we need to scale the L1. But I don't think we should scale the L1 in an appropriate manner in which we lose our decentralization property. And I think that's where L2s can maintain a value proposition, right? If there are experiences or user flows or apps that are only performant or possible because of the properties that come alongside not having a distributed validator set, those should not go to quote unquote all to L1s with closed validator sets. Those should just go to their most logical conclusion, which is these somewhat centralized sequencer architectures that they are more centralized in the immediate censorship resistance term of the word. I'm by no means is anyone on our team going to say that MegaETH is more decentralized than Solana. That's just fake news, right? It may be many years in the future, they just become different trade-offs that become things people are willing to make, right? Which is hey, the guys in charge can't really rug unless they give me a chance to leave, right? A couple of days, security council, some sort of variation. But I think like the takeaway I have at least is, hey, ETH1 needs to like scale in a responsible manner. And for that portion of the market ETH does not capture by scaling responsibly, those should be captured by L2s in the barbell thesis, right? And that's a way that like, I think Ethereum's design choices create the most value for the world, right? Like both economic value, but also, hey, we need to get users on blockchains. Or maybe not, but I think that's my gut feeling.
Let's talk about that barbell. As we were talking about, like really what are L2s really good for is delivering exceptional features. And there's something that was going on in the MegaETH ecosystem last week that I think kind of underscores what the exceptional features that MegaETH are bringing to the market. You guys did a stress test, the stress test of MegaETH. You guys published a bunch of data about this stress test. Maybe you can kind of walk us through what was that stress test for? What were you hoping to learn? What did you learn? Anything cool that you saw or noticed? And overall, what did this stress test of MegaETH's capabilities do for you guys?
Yeah, I'll start with like a small analogy, right? The past couple of weeks have been like quite intense for all stakeholders, right? Market, blah, blah, blah. And I remember during the stress test, or a couple of days before the stress test, someone asked me, like, how are things going? You guys are taking a while to launch, blah, blah, blah. And all very valid points. And my takeaway was kind of like, I'm actually feeling great because, I can't code. I'm not a developer. And for the past 2 years, I just had to get on calls with Lei and the rest of the team and just like trust me, bros, like this trains really fast and it has like unbelievable compute and it can handle crazy levels of activity. And I'm just like, well, it makes sense on paper, but where is it? And we saw it. And that was really awesome. Like genuinely, there was a level of, obviously this is not organic activity. We made all of the transactions ourselves. But I remember using chains like ETH and Sol, I would go trading and stuff. And like when there was a lot of people playing the game broke. And it's just like, I couldn't do swaps. I couldn't do anything. I remember back in 21, I'd have to spend like 6% of my portfolio on to exit a position during a market downturn. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ, like I've spent like $500 and like, that's like, well, I hope I do well in the future because it's just craziness. But we basically did like, an insane amount of transactions per second. And we did it while letting people play these games, which were like low latency games on chain. So we had Zero X Mons, who's the founder of SudoSwap. He built a fully on-chain Pokemon game. Our team took the Crossy Road game, made it on-chain, put it onto the mainnet. And people were able to play these things while we were just doing an egregious amount of spam on the chain.
I like the egregious word.
It's true. It's true. And
just inappropriate levels.
Inappropriate amount of transactions.
The block explorers died. They died. They were like, please stop doing this. But yeah, like it was cool. It was genuinely cool, and it made me feel like what MegaETH makes sense, and we're seeing why it makes sense. And we did this while also having fees like 5-6 times lower than chains like MegaETH that use ETHDA or like alt L1 chains that were like just like way more expensive. So it felt great from a like non-technical point of view. It felt like what we're doing makes sense, and people could feel it. But maybe Lei has some like actual data.
Well, actually, before we get to Lei, can you give us some numbers for people who weren't watching this stress test, and maybe you can convert this to amount of gas, like gigagas, estimates or transactions per second is still valid to me. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys can go on stress.megaeth.com, right? Okay. And we have like the retroactive information there. We did 11.4 billion transactions in 7 days. So that's more than like
11.4 billion transactions in 7 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Average TPS was 15.5K per second. We hit a peak TPS TPS of 55K. The average megagas was 1.6. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Wait. Average megagas was 1.6 thousand.
1.6.
So 1.6.
Yes.
1.6
gigagas then.
1.6 gigagas, yes.
Yeah, my bad.
Okay. And then so how, we've all seen numbers from like testnets before,
Yeah.
right? Or like I'm running these things locally and I achieved, billion transactions per second, whatever. How closely does this environment emulate what we will actually see post launch? Because that's kind of the benchmark, right? You guys show these numbers in, pre, that's one thing, but can you sustain these numbers?
I would say yes, because if we flip a switched, it's exactly the thing we're going to run in mainnet. It's like the same server, same IP address, same configuration, same admin keys. So exactly the same. Everything is the same. Like I feel bad because we're kind of spamming the chain a bit too much.
This was a mainnet stress test, not a testnet stress test.
Totally, yes,
Yeah.
exactly the mainnet.
We spent, I believe, 200 ETH a day, which we recycled, right? We're getting the
Right.
ETH, so don't worry, we didn't go bankrupt. But
you
it
guys
was
are just
all
taking
real.
ETH from one pocket and putting it into another pocket.
Bingo.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like when users use the chain, they had to pay ETH. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it was very low, it was very cheap, so it's totally fine. And effectively, it was the same as mainnet, right? It is mainnet.
Wait. With a
You just,
200
like,
ETH per day, what's that going to? Is that all the cumulative average token transfers of 0.0001 cent just adding up? When you multiply that, it's like equates to 200 ETH per day?
Yeah, approximately.
Wow.
We're talking about the gas fees, right? So like it's 200 ETH per day of gas fees to make the 11 billion transactions happen.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. How was 200? What's 200 times whatever the current price is? What was the total economic cost of the 11 billion transactions?
Economic cost as in the cost basis, or?
Yeah, just like how much did sending 11 billion transactions on MegaETH over 7 days, how much did that cost?
So the token transfer is 0.01 cent per transaction, and we can do a quick calculation.
I mean, 200 per day times the SAD current price of ETH is, $400K per day, something around that.
$1.1 million, I would say.
Oh,
$1.14 million.
$1.1 million over 7 days?
I think so. Let me check. So 3 zeros, 1 BK, 11.4. Yes, 1.14 million. Yes.
Lei just did that and said, I would never be able to do that.
There's a quant joke somewhere here I'm not going to make.
How does that compare to other chains?
I think, so we have actually a comparison. I think we are among the cheapest to transact on. And I think I do want to highlight something, which is it's actually pretty easy for you to build a chain and run a chain that is cheap when no one's actually using it, or when the number of users is small. But it's actually pretty hard for you to sustain that low transaction cost when you are pushing to on average 15.5K transactions per second with all market dynamics, right? Because if your chain can only sustain, say, 1,000 TPS, then the moment the demand goes beyond 1,000 TPS, then the top payers are going to decide the gas price. But in our case, because the chain has more capacity, we really worried about like breaking our infrastructure partners. So we didn't really go full throttle, but and that's the reason even at 15.5K transactions per second, like the base fee, the gas fee never fluctuated.
Mm-hmm. Lei, a lot of this, the stress test, I feel like it's just downstream of a lot of your just academic work. Like I feel like this stress test is also a stress test of Lei's knowledge and his PhD in computer science. I think that's what. Yeah. So like, how do you feel as just like kind of like your personal journey downstream of this test? What does this stress test mean for you?
It's amazing, and also by the way, all the credit goes to our mastermind Elon, who holds a real PhD in computer systems. My expertise was more like consensus, which unfortunately is not used in MegaETH. But anyway, all credit goes to him. I personally feel pretty excited, but because I'm just very motivated by all the DMs flowing in, telling me that, oh my God, the chain is real. It's like, it is real. It's been real for a year, but anyway, I'm just very happy that I think it's a nice. I also feel pretty much reassured because we now have like a real end-to-end stress test. I think you guys were asking perfect questions like, hey, what's the setting of this stress test, right? And I feel pretty comfortable right now because it's exactly the same servers that we're gonna run our mainnet on. I mean, it's the exact same deployment. We're not gonna do any redeployment or anything. It is the mainnet. So it's a great validation. I think it lets me sleep better at night. And also I think it kind of stress tested our downstream infrastructure partners, because I think it highlighted some issues with the infrastructure. I think some of them, I think the block explorers, they failed to keep up. And we're now literally working on new RPC methods tailored to make their lives easier when they try to handle such load spikes in the future when it goes like really public. And we're also working with our app teams, the Mafia, because they also run indexers. They post-process those transactions, and it also helped them identify the potential bottlenecks in their pipelines. So I think in general, I think it's extremely meaningful exercise for the entire ecosystem. I'm just very happy.
What's the secret sauce that MegaETH has that really unlocks this throughput? Like, what is the unique thing that MegaETH has that other blockchains doesn't have that allows 11 billion transactions over 7 days?
Right. So I think, we have been talking about a lot of our optimizations, for example, parallelization, JIT compilation, and the peer-to-peer network improvements. But I think something we have not been talking a lot about is our new state trie design. We call it SAUT, Small Authentication Large Tries. So think of it as a direct replacement of Ethereum's Merkle-Patricia trie, or commonly known as the Merkle tree. So the thing is, with any EVM chain, or with any chain that you want some hope to like settle onto Ethereum as a layer 2, you need a tree that authenticates to the entirety of the chain state. And here, chain state is basically the list of balances, the list of account nonces, how much money each person have, how much ERC20 tokens each person has, right? So these states need to succinctly go into a single hash. And this process is what we call managing and updating the state trie. And before our optimization, state trie management takes more than 90% of block building. In other words, if you spend 7 days processing those 11.4 billion transactions, you would spend 70 days on managing the state trie. So in other words, you are kind of only spending 10% of the time running the transactions and 90% of the time like doing post-hoc management. So what we did, I think, which is pretty interesting compared to what other chains have been doing, is we completely redesigned the data structure. And I think many teams have kind of identified this bottleneck after we did. And I think what they did was they tried to optimize the database that stores this state trie, but I think not many of them has tried to just revamp and redesign the data structure itself, right? So there's a difference between the mathematical structure and also the physical database that holds these data, right? I think most people are like rearranging the data in the physical medium, but for us, we just completely redesigned the mathematical structure. And what we optimized for was, okay, so many people are trying to improve the database, but our goal has always been that let's just get rid of the database. So I think something that's very unique about our state trie is it takes so little space that you don't have to constantly update your database, right? Because you don't have to store it in a database. You can just fit it in the main memory of your computer, which usually goes at most maybe 128 to 56 gigabytes, and that's it. So it alleviates the potential bottleneck of constantly reshuffling data from the state trie to the database completely. And now it's just a very quick memory read. So I think this, I would say, is one of the secret sauces, like just a complete revamp of the Ethereum Merkle state trie data structure.
Lei, you've done this in a way that still preserves full EVM compatibility?
Very good question. Extremely sharp question. So I think there are too many words like to describe, too many terms to choose from. So I would not claim Ethereum compatibility because I think someone kind of shout at me. But what we achieved was, okay, so you can you can just deploy whatever bytecode you have on any other chain as is. It runs on Ethereum. The only difference here is we're tweaking the gas model. So some opcode runs a bit cheaper, some opcode runs a bit more expensive. And second, the state root is now computed differently. So in other words, for the same state, you can imagine as for the same list of accounts and for the same list of balances, the state root, the hash that exists in the block header will be different from what it would be Ethereum mainnet. But the good news is almost, I would say, no application depends on the particular way to compute the state root. And so I would say it's compatible because it's bytecode level compatible, but people may disagree. So I describe what I can describe.
Hey, Bankless Nation, it's David. If you're hearing this, that's because you are listening to the free Bankless podcast feed. Did you know that there is a premium Bankless RSS feed? The premium feed has extra interviews that I do for my own personal research and just deeper questions that I want answered about the crypto industry, questions that I want to answer so I can be more informed as an investor, both at Bankless Ventures and also just in my own personal portfolio too. Also, there are no ads, which means if you listen to the premium feed instead of the free feed, you'll get about 20 hours of your life back every year because you choose to support Bankless directly. So if you're interested in getting extra content all while skipping the ads, or you just appreciate what we do here and want us to keep doing it, we'd appreciate it if you signed up for Bankless Premium. And there is a link in the show notes to get started. Cheers to a good 2026.
What if you could trade gold, Forex, and global markets with the same tools and speed that you use for crypto? That's exactly what BITGET TRADFI unlocks. After strong beta demand, including over $100 million in single-day gold trading volume, BITGET TRADFI is now live for all users. Inside of your existing BITGET account, you can trade 79 instruments across Forex, precious metals, indices, and commodities, all settled directly in USDT. No platform switching and no fiat conversions. This is BitGet's universal exchange vision in action. Crypto and traditional finance side by side. You get deep liquidity, low slippage, and leverage up to 500x, letting you apply crypto strategies to macro markets. New to TradFi? Start with gold. The gold USD pair is liquid, macro-driven, and a familiar natural bridge between crypto and traditional markets. Try trading gold on BitGet now at bitget.com. Click the link in the show notes for more information. This is not financial advice. Okay, so with this optimization, with this stress test, we learned that MegaETH can sustain 11 billion transactions over 7 days for the low cost of $2 million or $1.1 million, which tells me that chain fees is not a viable business model for MegaETH. Like, I don't think it's cool that you guys can do 11 billion transactions per second. I don't think you guys are getting to a sustained level of organic 11 billion transactions per second anytime soon. So that implies that economic sustainability for the MegaETH system is not going to come from chain fees. So if it's not going to come from chain fees, where is it going to come from?
Yeah, so I can take this one. I think that the general thinking was there's this fundamental misalignment of interests, right? Because as MegaETH, as we get more users and our block space becomes, let's say, more valuable, we want to charge more fees because, vendor lock-in, we can make more money, right? But I think that's actually short-term thinking because the way Mega grows is by letting everyone come and use MegaETH for as cheap as humanly possible. I think that's one of the main reasons why Solana was actually able to provide such a good value proposition for users, right? Pump was initially in the Blast ecosystem. But the second there's 1,000 people launching meme coins on Blast, right? Blast maybe would get expensive. Again, I don't remember the exact Blast configuration, but that's more or less what happens if you use ETH and a couple other statements, right? But yeah, I think our opinion was, hey, we want to be as cheap as possible. And we want to get cheaper over time so we can get more users as opposed to get less users as we become more successful. And in that scenario, we basically said, well, we need to more or less find a way to make gas consistent and run it at cost, right? Not really make any money on it. I think that the second point is okay, how do we make money as a chain, right? I think the era of launch a token for the sake of having a token and just that's done. So you kind of need to build some sort of real business model. And we kind of came down to stablecoins. At least that's what we have now. We plan on building more first-party applications in the future. But the general thinking is, hey, we have worked on stablecoin. We've worked on building a bunch of apps or facilitating a bunch of founders to build cool apps. How do we find a way to have a win-win where we can, earn off of their success, right? Without necessarily like hurting their users by having fees that are expensive, or B, in any way, shape, or form, messing with their economics. And the answer there is the hidden tax of T-bill yields that come in stablecoins, right? Everyone who has a dollar on chain, right, especially after Genius, is not getting the yield for that dollar. So if you're holding USDT or USDC, right, on like Ethereum L1, someone somewhere is internalizing a T-bill yield, right, on your behalf. What we basically said is, hey, we're going to have like this native stablecoin USDM, and when applications use USDM, we earn the T-bill yield for that, right? That goes into the MegaETH balance sheet, let's say. And what that does is it allows us to like grow the chain, reinvest into the chain in a way that doesn't necessarily harm end users. One can argue that end users should be getting their yields, right? But I think then you just have to ask yourself, well, what kind of reasons are people coming onto your chain for, right? Someone who's stablecoin farming should not be stablecoin farming on MegaETH, right? They should not be parking their stablecoins on MegaETH. They should be doing that on ETH-L1. ETH-L1 is more secure than Mega, right? You're coming on the Mega because there's cool apps on Mega. You're coming on the Mega because you want to do something unique on Mega. And then having to deal with this hidden tax, which you wouldn't have been earning anyways, I think is a very reasonable trade-off. So the way Mega makes money is via these T-bill yields. It doesn't hurt apps. It doesn't hurt users. And in fact, it's the opposite. If the app becomes more successful, Mega is able to earn more money and users are able to maintain cheap fees. So we think it's this almost like symbiotic relationship. Again, I think for better or for worse, we keep experimenting and trying new things with Mega, both on the tech side as well as BD side. Maybe it'll be a complete failure. I hope not, but it's possible. Just our general thinking is, there's this famous like Einstein quote, I think, which is like, the definition of madness is to try the same thing twice and expect a different result. And we just kind of came to the conclusion, well, we have to try new things because what else are we doing here, right? So yeah, that's the way we're at least thinking about economics.
I think it makes sense, right? It's sort of a TVL or AUM type of revenue structure, right? That's passive, that's in the background, that still provides users value, but with less friction. There is one other leg of maybe a three-legged stool of where L2s and even chains in general can charge, let's say, for their service, which is block ordering, so MEV. And this is, if you look at kind of Solana, for instance, this is how Solana generates the revenue that it generates. What about MEV? Is that like off the table from you guys? Like you'd be perfectly positioned running the sequencer to collect that. Base collects it. A lot of the L2s collect it today. Why not mention that? And like, is that a factor in the revenue model?
Yeah, it is. And we actually have thought a lot about it because me personally, and I think the team by extension fundamentally disbelieves is microscopic auctions. And microscopic auctions basically is what Ethereum layer 1 style, tip-based, priority fee-based ordering, because you can kind of think of it as for every block, you are literally doing an auction, and from the people who pay the most to the people who want to pay the least, you kind of order the transactions, right? It's literally like every single block, every 12 seconds, you are running an auction to decide what's the block ordering on a layer 2, on Ethereum layer 1. But I think what it fundamentally breaks for us is because our block interval is so small, because in our case, the blocking interval is 10 milliseconds at the at the mini block level. It's not constructive to imagine that people can run auctions at such latency, because say I'm a trader in New York and the sequencer literally is in Tokyo, then it takes me about 60, almost I think 100 milliseconds to even have my intention of how much I want to pay for this block transmitted to the Tokyo sequencer. So running auctions at this kind of fine granularity completely breaks down. So what we are trying to achieve, what we're trying to do here, I think we call it the proximity market, is instead of microscopic auctions where you have to dynamically pick your ordering preference every block, you do it on a much coarser granularity, like every month or every week, every quarter or so. So you run those auctions at this kind of interval and decide a bunch of people that will have the seat to co-locate with the sequencer. And once you do that, then they can take whatever algorithm they want to run and run them on these seeds, which are basically virtual machines that are right next to the sequencer. So the quotes we get from our cloud provider is down to 1 millisecond. And if people want to optimize, they can even get down to 100 or even tens of microseconds, which I think is right there with NASDAQ level high frequency trading. Yeah, so this is kind of how we want to like collect quote unquote MEV, but also I think for us to collect part of the MEV, we really want to redistribute it to the community. We really want to reinvest in the ecosystem, but that's kind of a topic that Namik should highlight. But I think on the technical design, our goal is to have just kind of semi-long-term auctions every week, every month to decide who can co-locate with the sequencer. And also it helps incentivizing people to move next to the sequencer, because the reason for you to have a 10 millisecond block interval is for you to build efficient liquid markets, right? What's the purpose of 10 millisecond block interval if those really high frequency traders, which are really the people who are responsible for market liquidity, are going to stay at the opposite side of the world and just remotely market make, right? They should come to the sequencer. So this, I think, is both an incentive structure and also, I think, a more practical way for us to have like efficient priority allocation when you have real-time trading.
Yeah, what's fascinating about that design is, I guess it's maybe also in the spirit of saying the quiet part out loud, right? And just creating a mechanism for handling this, because when you look at very high TPS chains, and including very high block time chains, you could see it sort of collapsing to that sort of thing anyway at the social layer. Like sometimes I look at Solana and the amount of co-location that is happening. Yes, it's Amsterdam. For those that don't know, Amsterdam is a massive hub that many of the Solana validators are located in. It's kind of like, I don't know enough to say it's like what percentage of the network it is, but it is the place if you want to collect the max MEV. And so you see a lot of validators, people running Solana infrastructure, co-located there, but they don't really talk about that so much, right? It's not advertised in the marketing material, right? So whereas with MegaETH, you're just sort of saying the quiet part out loud, which is like, and designing a mechanism for it, which is to say, hey, it's really valuable to be co-located next to a sequencer. It just is.
And also explicitly selling it.
Yeah, and here's a transparent way to actually like take a Moloch type problem and sort of auction it at some level. Of course, listeners can imagine different ways that this type of thing can go wrong, but at least you're taking a step of making it transparent, auctioning it, and creating a mechanism to feed this back to the community. And there's something I really like about that, actually.
The transparency part is really important, because I think as an independent trader, I think our mechanism could actually empower more independent, curious traders, because you, as an independent trader, you definitely don't want to navigate the maze of which VPS, which server provider I should use to get the minimum latency to a Solana or to a chain validator, right? So
I think it's simply like, these are controversial decisions, but we think they make sense because it goes back to mega token holders, right? Like, if the bottom line is that we're trying to build systems that value like mega token holders, I think it's like fair. It's decentralized in its own way. It basically like turns these private value capture options and turns them into almost like a public goods of sorts. So the value goes back, to every stakeholder. The reason why it's not worth mentioning, because you need users, right? Like no one's going to participate in proximity markets unless people are using Mega, unless there's apps that people want to participate in. There's a reason why like David and Ryan are on MegaETH, not because, they feel guilty after a podcast episode of us, but because there's something you want to do. And, that basically means that, like, realistically speaking, I don't think proximity markets are going to be this amazing story in the first day of Mega being live, because we're going to have to do a lot of the hard work of making sure that all of our apps go live. We find PMF of some of these applications. And over time, people actually want to co-locate with the MegaETH sequencer. And when that happens, instead of telling them like, oh, send some money to a bank account and you can sit next to MegaETH in Tokyo or wherever we are at the time, we've rebuilt a system where you're like, this is how much it costs based on everyone else, denominated in tokens and mega tokens, and you create structural economics that benefits anyone who's choosing to hold the token. So we just think it's a bit more of an honest approach. Again, well, let's see what happens.
I do appreciate just the understanding that the whole point of MegaETH is to collapse the business model of selling block space, which forces you guys, it's a forcing function to get a little bit more creative about how to capture value. And so, creating USDM, selling co-location. Is there anything else? Is it kind of just like, as good ideas come in, we'll throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks? Or like, do you guys have like a third or fourth product lined up, or any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like our general opinion is like, hey, let's look at the EVM and say end to end where are there problems that we can rebuild from first principles. So Elon and Lei did that, or at least they tried to with MegaETH, right, as a blockchain. And they've built like an unbelievably high performing blockchain, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing as, Mega, as we move forward, is continue to make MegaETH really good, but then also try and identify additional bottlenecks within the EVM or just the general, like how we understand blockchains to be today, and try to build first-party applications to solve for those problems, right? So, I think we're really interested in like, a lot of that design space. A lot of it is, to be announced over the following months. But yeah, I think our general opinion is, we built this great blockchain. We've facilitated applications on this chain, and we're going to continue to facilitate applications on this chain. It's been 2 years. We have a few apps that we think will be exciting. There's been a lot of drama about apps on MegaETH. And there'll be lots of drama in the future about apps on MegaETH, right? Like, we will not stop trying to have cool applications on the chain. And we're not going to stop trying to work with those applications on doing something that's unique. And anytime we progress into building first-party applications or first-party experiences, we think it's because it's net positive for MegaETH and MegaETH token holders as a general group.
Let's talk about MegaETH's app strategy, because the other thing that I think is refreshing about MegaETH is like back in the old days of blockchains, there was no app strategy. It was like credible neutrality, like don't touch the app layer. Whatever emerges on the app layer is great, but we don't want to have a hand in that. And MegaETH has kind of just taken a very different approach, which is like, no, we are going to directly foster our own app layer as aggressively as possible, which I find refreshing. Namik, maybe you can kind of just like walk us through what the MegaETH philosophy is with like incubating its own app ecosystem.
For sure. If an app, like the general thinking is like, we cannot end up in a situation where we just have a bunch of repeat applications that exist on every other chain. And there's two reasons. First, like, well, why would anyone come and use the chain if it's the same apps, right? So that's the basic one. But then the second one is like, okay, like, what is the point of us spending the past 3 years of our lives trying to build this thing if there's literally nothing new that can exist on this chain? It's just like, I'm not smart enough to be able to just enjoy the complex technical problems that Lei is facing, and that's how he enjoys his life. But like, this thing needs to exist for a reason, right? So what we did is we basically just started trying to find founders and convince founders to, quit whatever they're doing, take the entrepreneurial plunge, and build cool shit, to be frank. Is everything cool? No. Something's really cool? Sure. Did some founders not be able to, did they go bankrupt before they were able to go live? Yeah. Did some founders decide there's another chain or like another opportunity that's like more enticing? Totally. So all of these things have happened. But we are, cautiously optimistic, and we're quite excited because at the end of the day, we're going live with applications which we think are cool. And we have a bunch of unique flows that like I have not had in my life, let alone in crypto, that will be on MegaETH in the months that follow, right? So like the general opinion is that, we should find founders, we should work with these founders to build unique apps. We didn't have a chain until, we'll have a chain like 5 days from now. But like for the vast majority of the history of MegaETH, there was no chain for these app founders to use. So it naturally created like this question, like, okay, like, you know, we want to do this, we're excited, but there's like fundamental bottlenecks. We aren't able to iterate as fast as we'd like, bunch of dependencies that we're not aware of. But what I'm really excited for is now we're still able to push through and get a bunch of cool apps. Some, depends on what you like, gaming, consumer DeFi, lending. I can start naming you apps if that's what you like. But what I'm really excited about is the fact that we will have a mainnet and we will be able to double down on getting way more unique people to try build unique apps. Because my general opinion is that like we have a massive brain drain issue in crypto, right? Like, unless you're in MegaETH unless you come to crypto because of like deep, genuine interest in like distributed systems or like systems design, right? Like, I came into crypto because of the, I don't want to be a pun, but like, the promise of going bankless, right? Like, I came into crypto because I did not like the idea of having to deal with like a sovereign who has control over me. I like the idea of permissionless systems, peer-to-peer networks. I think a lot of those founders that could have come and built awesome apps couldn't do it last cycle because the UX was garbage. And this cycle, they just left to AI, right? And that's just kind of like a really shitty situation for crypto applications. And like maybe the answer is it doesn't actually matter. We just need something like Aave, which is global lending, and we can call it today. But I think there's a massive design space which just hasn't been explored. And its founders they're not here anymore. So we have to do proactive work. We can't be credibly neutral because that implies that there's abundance of developers, there's an abundance of founders, and they'll all build stuff and you don't want to pick winners. My bigger fear is the developers are gone. It's scarce. No one's motivated to build anything. And you actually can't be credibly neutral because if you do that, we just don't end up with any more apps. We have to go in and we have to like try things, even if it ends up backfiring on us, right? And it's backfired on Mega in a couple ways, don't get me wrong, because the alternative is worse, which is we end up with nothing for sure. I don't know. That's kind of like a bit of a doomer point of view, maybe. But that's kind of like how we approach the problem at Mega.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate like the level of just like agency and personal responsibility that you and just the MegaETH team feels about growing and incubating apps. There is something resonant about having this app that can do 11 billion transactions over 7 days at essentially zero cost per transaction, while also having this like incubator accelerator arm of it as well. The Mega Mafia, do you consider that to be an accelerator? And like because like you guys have this like AUM business with USDM, and so you guys are incubating apps that help grow the AUM of your business model. So like it's kind of an accelerator. So like how do you think about it in terms of just like the value capture of the whole system?
Definitely. So the real answer is we figured it out over time, right? The first thesis of Mega Mafia was just like, hey, let's just go find founders, let's just get them to build stuff and let's just go live a bunch of apps, right? And then, the apps took a while to build, Mega took a while to build, and we had more time and we're like, okay, well, we should get like more apps to build on MegaETH. And the thesis was always, look, we're not going to take anything from the applications. That was the initial thesis at least, right? We're not going to ask them for any equity. We're not going to give them any dollars either. Like we don't give them money. They don't give us tokens, nothing. It was just like a trust me bro agreement to build on Mega, right? I would say over time, and I think the reason why that was fair is because no chain existed, right? Like I can't force you to come and like, yeah, sure, we'll fly you to like a country and we'll sit together for a month and work together. But realistically speaking, I think it's just wrong to force someone to like agree to build on a chain that does not exist. Like, dude, what if the chain doesn't work? Like that's not very nice. But now that the chain's live, right? I think we're going to ask ourselves again from first principles, how does Mega Mafia work? Right now, the ask is to use USDM, right? And we've worked with a few of the key Mafia applications, and we've even like worked on helping source some liquidity and like try and make sure that they have just the minimum MVP amount of motion to be able to succeed and at least see if their PMF works. The ask on our side is just use USDM. As Mega goes live in a few days from now, I think we'll have a great opportunity to say, look, we actually have the chain. Let's figure out what's like 10 things we want to see exist on Mega. Let's find 10 people to build those things. And then let's have them use USDM for sure. Let's potentially look at investing in some of these founders, depending on how Mega's going, and becoming potentially like even more opinionated. I think the general problem we have is there's just not enough founders in crypto. And I'm less worried about like isolating founders than I am not even having founders. Now the edge case here is, what if like the next Meow, right, founder of Jupiter, doesn't want to come to join Mega Mafia, and are we like, making them not want to build on Mega? That would suck. It's something I think about a lot. And I think the hope is that like, hey, this chain's very performant, and Lei, myself, we're all still available if you have any issues to work and power through. And like, you want to build something amazing, build something amazing. I just think that like the day of being hands off is really over. And I do this, and I think our thinking is like that we don't really have a choice here, but to try and force function apps. And for better or for worse, it could not work, but we have to try.
One other possibility here that has more recently risen to my attention here is that the next like billion users might actually be AI agents. And so if that's the case, then it could be that AI DevX is a thing that blockchain teams really need to think about. One thing that's been interesting to me, and sort of a bit of a realization, is if you believe, as I do, that some of the reason we haven't had more crypto adoption has been the UX is terrible. The UX is really hard in crypto.
Yeah.
That's only true for humans. Actually, all the UX problems we have are actually benefits for little software agents, right? So the clunky MetaMask telling you some transaction, you have no idea what you're about to click. Guess who understands that perfectly? In like clear English language, like could not be more clear to a software agent what exactly is happening here. There's no confusion. It's very specific. It's very specified. It's software. It's software talking to software. And so if you believe that all of the bad UX for humans becomes actually good UX for agents, and you have abundant cheap block space, and then you have these agents like starting to come online. I mean, we've seen all the kind of the OpenClaw stuff happening. Well, maybe we should start really prioritizing agent users in some of our blockchains experiences. I know this is still somewhat early, and like, who knows? There's a dependency here. Namik, you said we lost some of our best devs to AI. Yeah, that's true, but we might actually gain some of our best devs from AI now in this agentic part of the cycle. You have any thoughts there?
This is a Lei question. I don't talk about things I don't know. He actually for Lei.
What do you know, Lei? What do you know about this?
Used to be at the MIT AI lab or something.
Right. So it's quite interesting. I think to help agents, you need the block space to be sufficiently cheap so that they can try and error. I think something that's very interesting that agents have immense amount of energy. I mean, unlimited amount of energy to do that humans do not are just try and errors. Like I get angry if MetaMask does not work on MegaETH for like after 2 tries. I just throw my phone out of the window. But
yes.
Agents don't care, exactly as you mentioned. So I think being cheap enough for agents to work with. Second, some inherent features. So one feature we have been talking about, we have been thinking about is one, you can just imagine this user flow, right? A user wants to achieve something, right? Hey, I want to swap $1,000 for what? 0.5 ETH. I hope it's not 0.5, but it seems that it's the case. But so I want to I want to swap $1,000 for 0.5 ETH. Okay, and just agent figure out like what app just get me $500. Sorry, get me 0.5 ETH, right? So now the agent will kind of try to use different paths, different DEXs, different aggregators. So it's almost like intent protocols. I think with agent, you almost have your own intent solver, right? So then the thing is, as a user, I would worry, hey, what if the agent just goes crazy, right? There's always the possibility. I think the thing with any like human in the loop, but now agent in the loop system is that there's always the possibility of just random errors. So I want to guarantee, I want to kind of govern I want to sandbox the behavior of the agent. So something we're thinking about is, what if the blockchain can, as a built-in primitive, lets user describe either in natural language or in very simple like drag and drop user interface, describe what the transaction should achieve in order to be successfully included on the chain. In the sense that me as a user can literally just type in the whatever interface I use, saying that, okay, this transaction should at most deduct $1,000 from USDC, for example, from my account and should at least give me back 0.5 ETH. As long as this case is hit, I don't care what transaction it is, right? Just agent go wild. Then the agent can just literally go wild. And I have my peace of mind knowing that whatever the agent do, I don't really care. I at least get 0.5 Ether back and I spent at most $1,000. I think this is something that can be very useful. And we're just very actively brainstorming similar features we can help agents like this. I think there's great parallel to draw between software programming agents, like the agents that you run on your desktop, and the agents that run on the chain or uses the chain. Because I think sandboxing and just establishing this trust boundary is always the hardest part. And I think as I would say, infrastructure company, I think this is what we should focus on. Of course, we should also try to build our own agents, whatever. But I think there are a lot of interesting stuff that we can actually meaningfully do to make agents' life easier, right? So, yeah.
Let's talk about the Mega token. Over the arc of MegaETH's history, I understand like you guys have just had a pretty like opinionated strategy with Mega token. You guys did the NFT sale. You guys had the public sale on Echo. And overall, it's been kind of a departure from what I think the rest of the market has kind of treated their token in the past. There's no airdrops here. There's just like a kind of a unique, fresh strategy with what it takes to get the Mega tokens into the hands of people. Talk about your guys' like strategy here.
Yeah, I think that the general idea was like, I remember when I remember last cycle, like there were like many, like there was like price discovery happening in public markets, right? Like that's just the truth of the matter. I think it was pretty awesome. I think and then we learned about a lot of issues like the low float high FTV issue, right? Like, you know, the number that you see on the screen, right? That kind of changes, but the number stays the same. So, you know, we learned a lot of things. And a lot of people saw like a lot of money being made. So private markets decided to like, you know, bid a ton, right? So a lot of price discovery moved to private markets. And the end result was like, you know, public participants weren't necessarily getting equal access to assets, right? So I think like that was a problem that we saw. And we thought that it was just not ideal because, you know, crypto is unique because a lot of users in crypto want to be owners as well, right? And I think this is not necessarily the case with like most industries. In most industries, you like, for example, like, you know, in like tech, right? Just because I own an iPhone, right? I don't have any Apple stock. It's not because I think Apple's bad or anything. I just don't have Apple stock because, you know, I have crypto. But anyways, so and I think it's totally fine. That's not exactly the case in crypto, where people have historically been like, I want to be an owner in the applications I use. It felt very unfair. So basically, what we did is we said, hey, you know, we did this. We raised some money from like, you know, Dragonfly. Funny enough, like the founders of Ethereum, Vitalik and Joe, are also participating in the round. And a year later, we basically said, you know what, we just want to give the exact same terms to Echo users, right? And if they want to participate, they can participate. If not, they don't have to. Sold out very quickly. I think like 80% of Echo users tried to participate, broke a few records on the Echo platform. And we were like, oh, wow, we're onto something. Like, this is cool. I think there's a way to get people to probably use the chain. They get equal access. And we basically just doubled down with that thesis all the way until most recently when we did the Sonar sale, where we started $1 million valuation. We capped it at 999 mil because we didn't think it was fair to buy it unicorn val from Mega. And yeah, it ended up, you know, oversubscribing by like 25x or something. Obviously, you know, Bitcoin was not at 70K. And yeah, that's basically been the thesis. The thesis has been, for better or for worse, that we don't necessarily think airdrops make sense. We think that like if the potential users want to be owners, they can be owners. And we basically gave them access, and we tried to have price discovery be accessible to you know, participants who aren't just VCs. Yeah, let's see how how it pans out when the time comes. But we do think that, I mean, I'd personally rather have like 10, 15,000 crypto users as an investor base. They love crypto. They understand why this industry needs to exist, as opposed to like a couple of big VCs that are great, but it's just like 2-3 people. Less momentum, I'd say. Reddit did something similar actually with their mods. Power users of Reddit were able to invest in the pre-IPO for Reddit, but maybe we should get rid of that one. Securities laws, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, guys. So this episode is coming out the day of Mainnet release. So hey, congrats on getting Mainnet out. We're recording this before, so we're assuming Mainnet comes out on Monday. What does the next short-term bit of time look like for you guys? What does an actual Mainnet release look like for you guys? Is there like a war room that you guys are in? And what does the following weeks and months look like?
We're next to each other. We're in different phone booths. So we're working.
You guys
away.
have centralized sequencers then, even at the human level, huh?
Bingo. I think the goal is apps, right? Like we want to get some of these apps live. And we want people using some of these apps and seeing what's special. We want to kickstart the USDM application flywheel. And as that started to work, we want to start building more unique applications that leverage MegaETH's block times and capacity capabilities.
Very good. We're excited to see what MegaETH does in the future. Good luck on Mainnet. And I do think that this is the beginning of a second era, maybe, of layer 2s. Not saying the Mainnet release of MegaETH, but you're certainly in that second cohort of layer 2s that have looked at the layer 2's previous cycles and kind of done things a little bit differently. So it's a second generation. It's very exciting to see launches like this, and we wish you much success. Bankless Nation, of course, got to let you know, none of this has been financial advice. Other than we know MegaETH transactions are going to be cheap. You lose what you put in, but we are headed west. This is the frontier. It's not for everyone, but we're glad you're with us on the Bankless journey. Thanks a lot.